Welcome, traveler. Tonight, I invite you to set down your modern worries, silence your buzzing phone, and join me on a peculiar journey, back to a time of sand, stone, and scorching suns, back to ancient Egypt. Ah, Egypt, land of shimmering pyramids, golden masks, and legends of mighty pharaohs, right? But have you ever wondered what it would really feel like to live there? To open your eyes not as a mighty king, but as an ordinary person, waking up to another grueling day beneath that unforgiving desert sky? Because, my friend, the truth is, those pyramids weren't built for your comfort. They were built by hands like yours, backs like yours, under a sun that did not forgive. Before we begin, take a deep breath. Settle into your cozy bed, maybe dim the lights, or let the hum of your fan mimic the ancient now breeze that, well, might not have been as refreshing as the documentaries say. And if you find yourself enjoying this kind of sleepy, historical storytelling, do feel free to gently tap that subscribe button and leave a little like. It helps this cozy corner of the internet grow, and lets me keep sharing forgotten tales that soothe the mind. Now, close your eyes and imagine this. The first thing you feel isn't your soft pillow. It's the relentless heat pressing down on your body. You're lying on a straw mat, barely cushioned from the baked mud floor beneath you. Above, the sky is already turning a cruel, brilliant gold, and you haven't even opened your eyes yet. In this world, there are no blinds, no air conditioning, and certainly no iced coffee waiting for you. Just the sun. And it doesn't just shine here, it attacks. The linen tunic draped over your body is as thin as a whisper, offering no real defense. And sunscreen? Ha! You have exactly two options: smear yourself with mud, or crocodile dung. Neither smells like coconut. By the time your tired feet shuffle outside your humble reed hut, the sand beneath your soles is already hot enough to cook lentils. And it's barely breakfast. The Nile shimmers in the distance, a ribbon of life, and let's be honest, a smelly one. This river is your bath, your water source, your everything. But don't expect privacy. It's a public space, shared by neighbors, children, goats, and the occasional ibis who has zero respect for your personal bubble. You dunk yourself into the muddy waters, hoping to scrub off the sweat and sand. There's no soap here. Only sand. Rough, gritty, and relentless. It's the ancient Egyptian way of skincare. And as you scrub yourself raw, flies circle you, frogs croak from the banks, and your stomach starts to growl. Time for breakfast? Prepare to be underwhelmed. Forget lattes and fruit bowls. Your feast is a coarse, heavy bread, part wheat, part sand. And to wash it down, a thick, lukewarm beer that tastes more like sour oatmeal than celebration. Even the children drink it. Not because it's edgy, but because it's safer than the river water. And all of this, it's just the morning. You still have an entire day of backbreaking labor waiting for you, fields to plow, stones to haul, overseers to endure. But we'll save that delightful chapter for the next part of our journey. So stay with me, traveler. Let your mind linger in the haze of Egypt's early sun. And as we turn the page to part 2, we'll discover what work, faith, and survival look like under the ever-watchful eyes of the gods and the pharaoh. And remember, if this journey has sparked a tiny ember of curiosity in your heart, go ahead and like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me, do you think you'd last a day in ancient Egypt? Or would you be begging for a time machine before lunch? Let's find out in our next chapter. So, you somehow survived the first blistering hours of an ancient Egyptian morning. Your belly is filled with gritty bread and sour beer. Your body already sticky with sweat, your skin irritated from sand you couldn't quite wash off. And now, as the sun climbs higher, the true work begins. You see, in ancient Egypt, there's no clock in, clock out. There's only the sun. And when it rises, it's time to move. Unless you were born into the rare, soot-draped world of scribes, priests, or royals, which, let's be honest, you weren't. Your day is defined by muscle, mud, and obedience. If you're a farmer, you head straight to the fields, or more accurately, the swamps. You wade ankle-deep in Nile muck, planting barley or pulling stubborn weeds while your overseer, usually a man with more bark than empathy, shouts orders from a shaded stool. Wooden plows drag through the earth, your bare hands yanking up the roots. And if your back aches? Good. That means you're doing it right. And if you're a laborer? Your job gets biblical. You're part of the workforce hauling stones, stones heavier than your entire family, across scorching ramps made of gravel and prayer. No gloves. No safety helmets. No second chances if you trip. These stones aren't just for any building. They're for the pharaoh's tombs, the gods' temples, the monuments that will stand longer than you ever will. You won't see your name carved into the walls. But your sweat? It's in every block. And if you're a woman, don't think the fields spare you. After grinding grain, hauling water, weaving linen, and tending the children, you still find yourself in the fields, hands callous, tunics soaked in your own labor. Your only break? Maybe, just maybe, when the baby naps for a few minutes. But don't get too comfortable. Because slowing down means falling behind. And falling behind means losing your family's grain quota. And no one wants to explain that to the tax collector. Trust me. And as the sun beats down from its throne in the sky, it's not just heat you fight. It's authority. Because in ancient Egypt, the sun isn't just weather. It's divine. Ra, the great sun god, watches over you. And the pharaoh? Well, he's not just your king. He's the living embodiment of Horus, son of Ra, a god among men. So, complaining about your job isn't just rude, it's blasphemy. Even whispering a grumble could earn you shackles. Or worse, a one-way trip to the underworld without any of your favorite burial snacks. And no, you'll never see the pharaoh's face. He's a distant figure, appearing only during grand festivals, floating by on a golden boat, flanked by guards and scribes. Blink, and he's gone. Back to a palace you'll never enter. And you? You're left in the dust, just lucky to sweat in his name. The sun blazes higher, the air grows still, and you keep moving. Because in this land, the day doesn't end when you're tired. It ends when Ari says so. But remember, this is only the day's first act. Next, we'll step into the sacred spaces of gods and spirits, where work meets worship, and every step you take must balance on the thin line between survival and superstition. So stay with me, traveler. We've only scratched the sun-baked surface of this ancient world. And as we continue, you might start to feel, perhaps the comforts of your own soft bed aren't such a bad place after all. And if you're still here, soaking up these sleepy, ancient tales, perhaps now's a good time to gently like this video, subscribe, and maybe even tell me in the comments. Would you rather face the overseer's whip? Or the judgment of the gods? Let's ponder that. In part 3. By now your muscles are aching, your skin roasted, and your linen tunic clings to you like a wet curtain. But before you even dream of rest, there's another realm demanding your attention, the world of the gods. Because in ancient Egypt, survival isn't just about eating and working. It's about keeping the divine forces happy, or at least keeping them from running your day. You see, religion here isn't a weekend affair. It's your operating system. Your job, your meals, your hygiene, even how you sneeze. All of it has to align with the wishes of gods who, let's be honest, seem to have some pretty complicated preferences. Wake up. You thank Ra for dragging the sun across the sky. Stub your toe? Careful. You might have just offended a spirit with a grudge. Every town has its own set of deities. Ra watches the skies. Sobek guards the Nile, when he's not busy terrifying villagers as a half-crocodile, half-nightmare. And then there's Batet, the cat goddess who, frankly, runs public relations. Want to eat? You offer a bit to the gods first. Want to sleep? You pray that Set, the god of chaos, doesn't decide to toss your house into a cosmic tantrum. Even funerals here are epic. Forget simple ceremonies. When you die, you're not done. You still have to pass tests, dodge demons, and have your heart weighed against the feather of truth. If your heart's heavy with lies, or, say, you stole your neighbor's goat, you get devoured by a creature that looks like it was designed by someone having a very bad dream. But despite the anxiety-inducing rules, Egyptians didn't see this as depressing. It was comforting in its own strange way. They believed life was a tightrope across a cosmic balance beam. Stay in line, honor the gods, uphold Ma'at, the principle of truth and order, and you'd win yourself a peaceful eternity with food, family, and maybe a nice little boat. Though if you were wealthy, the gods seemed to notice you just a bit more. Funny how that works, right? For the rest of us? We hope. We pray. And we keep sand out of the offering bowls. Ah, yes. The sand. Your ever-present, unwelcome roommate. It's in your clothes. In your bed. In your bread. No matter where you go, what you do, or how tightly you shut your mud brick door, it finds you. And on those particularly fun days, the gods bless you with a sandstorm. A blinding, suffocating slap from the heavens that turns friends into coughing silhouettes, and your face into a living sand sculpture. But that's just another Tuesday in Egypt. The truth is, you don't control much in this world. You endure. You respect the gods. And you try not to get too attached to comfort. Because comfort is for the statues, not for you. And yet, as you look up at the endless desert sky streaked with gold and crimson, there's something strangely beautiful in this chaos. A rhythm. A balance. Tomorrow, the cycle begins again. And so, you close your tired eyes, whisper a prayer to whoever might be listening, and hope the gods let you live another day. But our journey isn't over, traveler. Next, we'll step inside the healer's tent, where potions, prayers, and some, let's call them, interesting, remedies await you. And trust me, you might prefer the sand. So stay with me for part 4, where we'll explore the fine art of getting sick, and surviving it, in the ancient world. And by the way, if you're still cozy with me on this journey, don't forget to give this video a gentle like, and subscribe if you haven't yet. It tells me you enjoy these sleepy stories, and lets the YouTube pharaohs know to recommend them to more fellow wanderers like you. Tell me in the comments, which would scare you more? The overseer's whip, or Set's chaos? Let's talk about it, in part 4. You made it through another scorched day in ancient Egypt. But what happens when something goes wrong? When you slice your hand on a farming tool, or feel a strange ache in your belly that even the gods can explain away? Well, friend, welcome to the world of ancient Egyptian medicine. A fascinating, terrifying, and, let's say, creative blend of science, superstition, and sheer willpower. First, let's give credit where it's due. For their time, Egyptian healers were ahead of the curve. They had surgical tools, medical texts, and a surprising understanding of human anatomy. In fact, some of the world's earliest doctors walked these sandy streets. But before you get too excited, remember, here, science never walked alone. It held hands with magic. Your healer is both doctor and priest. And before he so much as looks at your injury, he might chant a protective spell, just to cover all bases. Because, you know, it could be an infection. Or it could be an invisible serpent spirit gnawing on your spleen. Better safe than eternally haunted. Your medicine cabinet? It's eclectic. Honey mixed with moldy bread? Shockingly effective. We now know both have antibacterial properties. Cow dung smeared on your chest for coughs? Less impressive. And possibly counterproductive. Got a headache? Your healer might crush some onions into a fine paste and massage it into your scalp while whispering hymns to Thoth, the god of wisdom. And if you need surgery? Yes, they had it. Abscesses were drained. Broken bones were set. Wounds stitched shut with linen thread. But don't expect anesthesia. Your only numbing agent? A friend holding your shoulders down while you scream into a mud brick. And the dentist? Let's just say, you'd rather not. Remember all that sand in your bread? It turns your teeth into pebbles by your 20s. When one gets infected, your options are simple. Live with it. Or have it yanked out with pliers forged by a blacksmith who probably skipped dental school. Oh, and let's not forget the amulets. Whether you're giving birth, getting a boil lanced, or sneezing too loudly in the temple courtyard, your healer will tie a charm around your neck. just in case. So yes, Egyptian medicine was a cocktail of brilliance and blind hope. But in a world where the line between science and sorcery was as thin as your linen tunic, it made sense. And honestly, wouldn't you prefer a healer who also throws in a few prayers? When all you have is a clay bowl, some honey, and the watchful eyes of vengeful gods. Now, as your wounds are bandaged, your spells recited, and your leeches, hopefully, removed, it's time for us to move on. Because next, we'll explore the curious lives of Egyptian women, where rights, reality, and resilience collide in a world that was far from equal, but far from powerless, too. So stay tucked in, traveler. Let the Nile's lullaby soothe you as we float gently toward Part 5. And since we've been wandering through ancient hospitals and haunted temples, this might be a good time to pause, stretch your modern toes, and if you're still enjoying this sleepy stroll through history, maybe like, subscribe, and share your favorite ancient remedy in the comments. Would you trust the onions on the scalp trick? Or take your chances with the cow dung? Either way, the sands of Egypt are waiting. Let's meet there, in Part 5. Let's shift our gaze now, traveler, from the searing heat of the fields and the bitter sting of the healer's tools, into the quieter, but no less demanding world of women in ancient Egypt. Now, you might be surprised, because for an ancient society, Egypt did give its women rights that would shock many later civilizations. They could own property, file for divorce, run businesses, and even hold their husbands into court. Sounds progressive, doesn't it? But don't pack your bags for a time-traveling go-boss vacation just yet. Because the day-to-day life of an Egyptian woman, especially if she wasn't draped in silk and gold, was anything but glamorous. You woke before the sun. And your to-do list? Endless. Grind grain by hand using a heavy stone that chews through both wheat and your spine. Then haul water from the Nile, cook breakfast over an open fire, care for the children, tend the livestock, manage the household, and, if needed, join your husband in the fields. All while wearing a simple linen dress, no shoes, no maternity leave, and certainly no spa days. Your breaks? Maybe, if the baby naps for 7 minutes. But even then, you're likely still swatting flies off your dough while rocking a fussy toddler on your hip. Childbirth? A battlefield of its own. No anesthetics. No sterile rooms. Just incense, midwives, whispered prayers, and hope. And yet they did it. Over and over again. And let's talk fashion. That linen dress? Light, breathable, elegant in its simplicity. But no underwear, no sandals, and the bugs, oh, the bugs. They saw you as an all-you-can-eat buffet, treating your exposed skin like an open invitation. Now, if you were born into a wealthy family, the script flipped. You might manage estates, read and write, even become a priestess. If you were royal, you could rule, as Hatshepsut and Cleopatra would later prove. But for the vast majority, the law might have seen you as an equal citizen. But your muscles told a different story. You were a one-woman workforce in linen, grinding, hauling, birthing, burying, and holding your family together by sheer will. And yet, Egyptian women had something rare in the ancient world: agency. They could speak in court, keep their inheritance, refuse to become property when they married. For their time, that was huge. Still, comfort? That was reserved for the goddesses carved in stone, not for the women elbow-deep in dough, while wiping mud off their child's face. And as the evening glow softens the edges of this ancient day, the fires crackle, the babies wail, and the linen clings just as it did at dawn. But in the quiet moments, perhaps sitting under a star-splashed sky, the women of Egypt whispered their own prayers, not to Ra or Osiris, but to the moon, to each other, to the strength inside them. And as we drift further down the Nile tonight, we'll sail into darker waters, where life doesn't end when the sun sets, where death is only the beginning. Because in Part 6, we enter the underworld, a place of scales, judges, and the terrifying jaws of a soul-devouring monster. So stay close, traveler. The the night is far from over. And by now, if these stories have lulled you into a cozy curiosity, feel free to like, subscribe, and maybe tell me in the comments. Would you rather be a farmer or a baker in ancient Egypt? Neither sounds easy, but each carried its own kind of dignity. Let's explore that in part 6. You've survived the brutal day, but in ancient Egypt, night doesn't bring relief. It brings the next challenge. Because here, death is not the end. It's just the beginning of a journey that would make even the most hardened bureaucrat weep. You see, Egyptians didn't fear death the way we might imagine. They prepared for it meticulously, like a traveler packing for the longest road trip of their life. When you die, your soul embarks on a journey through the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. And trust me, it's not a straight road. First stop, the Hall of Maat. Here, in a courtroom that makes our modern courts look like casual meetups, you stand, or rather your soul stands, before a panel of 42 guards, each eager to hear your confession. And you must proclaim, loudly and clearly, that you did not steal, that you did not lie, that you did not covet your neighbor's donkey. Every single rule, every tiny moral slip-up, it's on the record. And if you forget one, if you fumble your ancient legal script, well, that's where things get terminal. Because next comes the test. Your heart, believed to house your soul, is placed on a scale, balanced against the feather of truth. If your heart is heavier, burdened by lies, cruelty, or maybe just a few too many harsh thoughts, enter Amit, the soul devourer, part lion, part crocodile, part hippo, all terrifying. She doesn't fine you. She doesn't imprison you. She eats your soul, wiping you from existence entirely. No afterlife. No second chances. Just nothingness. And if you thought the process ends there, oh no. You still have to navigate swamps filled with demons, solve cosmic riddles, and recite spells from the Book of the Dead, which, to be honest, is more of a cheat sheet for the world's most anxiety-inducing exam. But if you pass, if your heart is light, your confessions flawless, your spells correctly pronounced, then, and only then, do you earn your place in the field of reeds. A perfect, peaceful version of Egypt. Crops always ripe. The Nile always calm. And yes, fewer sand fleas. It's paradise. But oh, the paperwork to get there. That's why Egyptians obsessed over tombs, burial rituals, and magical texts. They weren't just honoring the dead. They were preparing for the ultimate cosmic paperwork marathon. Because in ancient Egypt, even in death, you had to prove yourself. And that's where we'll pause for a moment, traveler. Right here, as your soul teeters on the scales. Because I want to gently remind you, if you've been enjoying this sleepy, ancient journey through heat, hardship, and now, the haunting bureaucracy of the afterlife, why not give this video a gentle like? Perhaps even subscribe if you haven't yet. And let me know in the comments. Would you pass the feather test? Or might your heart be just a little heavier than you'd admit? Your support keeps this sleepy corner of YouTube alive, and helps more wanderers find their way here for a soft, historical bedtime journey. But don't drift off just yet, because in part 7, we'll talk about the rituals, the embalming, and the sometimes inventive methods Egyptians used to make sure their bodies were ready for eternity. You won't want to miss it, because in Egypt, resting in peace was complicated. Let's continue in part 7. So, your soul has survived the scales. You've passed the tests, dodged the demons. But what about your body? You see, in ancient Egypt, the body wasn't something you simply left behind. It was your ticket to eternity. To the Egyptians, your physical form was as important in the afterlife as your soul. Without a body, your spirit would wander lost forever. And that's where the sacred art of embalming came in. A delicate, ritualistic process that turned fragile flesh into something eternal. Let's begin with the basics. First, your body was washed, purified with Nile water and scented oils. Not for comfort but to honor the gods, and prepare the body as a vessel for the journey ahead. Then came the organ removal. Every organ, except the heart, which they believed stayed in place for the judgment, was carefully extracted. The liver, stomach, lungs, intestines, each placed into ornate canopic jars, guarded by guards with animal heads, each guard protecting its organ like a cosmic security guard. And the brain? Ah, yes, the brain. That messy, grey thing inside your skull? They didn't think much of it. It was scooped out through the nose with a hook and discarded. To them, the brain was, well, not that important. The heart held the soul. The brain? Just filler. Once emptied, your body was packed with natron, a naturally occurring salt that would dry you out like a human raisin. For 40 days, you'd rest like that, baking gently under the desert sun. A process both sacred and a little unsettling. When fully dried, you were stuffed with linen, herbs, and sometimes sawdust, anything to make you look, well, less sunken. Then came the wrapping. Layer upon layer of linen, each bound with prayers, amulets, and protective spells whispered between the folds. The richer you were, the more elaborate the process. Layers of gold, intricate masks, jewels tucked between the wrappings. For the poor, a simple shroud, if you were lucky. Finally, you were placed in your sarcophagus. Carved, painted, sometimes with your face smiling back at the living. You'd be surrounded by grave goods. Food, wine, jewelry, and those tiny servant dolls called shabtis. Little figurines who would, in theory, work for you in the afterlife. Because yes, even in eternity, someone had to do the chores. But it wasn't going to be you. And so, the body was ready. Wrapped, blessed, and sealed. Tucked into your tomb, beneath painted ceilings and walls filled with spells and maps to the next world. You might think this sounds extreme, but to the Egyptians, this was love. This was duty. This was how you made sure the soul could find its body again, walk the fields of reeds, and live forever. And perhaps, as you lie in your own cozy bed tonight, wrapped in blankets far softer than linen strips baked in salt, you might find a little comfort in knowing that no matter how strange the rituals, they were born from the same fear and hope that we carry even today. A desire to belong, to continue, to be remembered. And speaking of remembering, in part 8, we'll enter the world of tomb robbers. Because in Egypt, even the dead weren't safe from the living. So stay with me, traveler. The sands still hold many secrets. And if these ancient stories are keeping you company tonight, go ahead and like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think? Would you prefer the elaborate tomb with golden masks? Or the quiet grave in the desert, letting the sands carry you home? Let's reflect on that in part 8. So, traveler, you've been embalmed, wrapped, blessed, and buried. Your tomb sealed tight with stone and sacred curses, meant to ward off intruders. But in Egypt, death never guaranteed peace. Because behind the grandeur of tombs and the reverence for the afterlife lurks a grittier truth. Tombs were treasure chests. And treasure attracts thieves. You see, the afterlife was expensive. And the wealth buried with the dead, gold, perfumes, precious oils, chests of linen, and in the case of the pharaohs, entire boatloads of treasure, made tomb robbery almost inevitable. No matter how many curses were scrawled on the walls, no matter how deep they hid the tombs in cliffs or canyons, the living were always tempted. Robbers came at night, with chisels and torches. Sometimes they were desperate villagers, starving during famine. Sometimes they were the very workers or priests who helped build and guard the tombs. Even common graves weren't safe. Poor Egyptians might only have a loaf of bread or a small jug of beer buried beside them. But in hard times, even that was worth stealing. And the state? Well, when they caught you, they made an example out of you. Punishments were brutal. Beatings, mutilations, exile, and for the unlucky, execution. But the risk? Still worth it. Because the dead don't fight back. And the wealth of a tomb could feed a family, or a village, for months. Yet, it wasn't just greed. Sometimes, It was survival. In a land where crops failed, wars raged, and the gods seemed distant. A few stolen funeral offerings could mean the difference between life and death for your children. Still, the irony was not lost on the Egyptians. They built monuments to eternity. But even they knew, nothing lasts forever. So, as you lay now in your imagined tomb, wrapped in linen, surrounded by treasure, perhaps you feel the uneasy truth that even in death, you might have to defend what's yours. And as we drift gently toward part 9, we'll explore the symbols carved into those tomb walls, the hieroglyphs, the ancient language of gods and scribes. But for now, close your eyes. Let the echoes of chisels fade into the night. And remember, in ancient Egypt, the sands always reclaim what's buried. Oh, and before we continue, if these gentle tales of forgotten worlds are helping you unwind tonight, maybe pause for a moment to like this video, subscribe, and let me know. Would you have dared to enter a cursed tomb? Or left the dead to their treasures? Your support keeps these sleepy stories alive. And let's fellow wanderers like you find their way here. Let's continue our journey in part 9. Now, traveler, let your imagination drift from the tombs, heavy with gold and ghosts, to the walls themselves, where the dead whispered their stories, in symbols, hieroglyphs, mysterious, elegant, enigmatic. They weren't just art. They were the language of the gods. Each temple, tomb, and monument was a canvas of life and death, faith and fear, carved not in haste but with reverence. A message to the cosmos, and to eternity. But hieroglyphs were more than pretty pictures. They were a complex writing system of over 700 characters, and growing. Some stood for entire words, others for sounds, and many were determinatives, little signs clarifying meaning. It was a language of riddles. No punctuation, no spaces. And the direction? That was a puzzle too. Left to right? Right to left? Top to bottom? It all depended on which way the birds and people faced. And reading them? That was a privilege. A tiny fraction of the population, the scribes, held the keys to this sacred code. To become a scribe was to step into power. Years of relentless study, memorizing hundreds of symbols until your hand curled into a claw. But the rewards? Oh, they were worth it. While the farmers labored in the sun, the scribes sat in shaded chambers, writing tax records, royal decrees, and religious texts. They rolled quietly from the shadows, their words shaping the very world the pharaohs claimed to command. And beyond the scribes, for the ordinary Egyptian, these carvings were magic. Literally. They believed hieroglyphs held sacred power. To write someone's name preserved their soul. To erase it was to annihilate them from existence itself. So, yes, spelling mattered. And perhaps, as you imagine those ancient walls glowing under flickering torches, you can hear the faint echoes of these symbols still speaking, telling stories of love, war, faith, and warning us, perhaps, that the written word outlasts even the tallest pyramid. Next, traveler, we'll return to the surface, to the brutal, dusty realities of daily life in Egypt, and ask the question, would you survive even one ordinary day? But before we continue, let's pause gently. We've now journeyed nearly an hour together. If these ancient tales have helped you settle into sleep, or sparked your curiosity while you relax, go ahead and like this video, subscribe, and maybe leave a comment. Which hieroglyph would you carve to tell your story? A feather? A boat? Or maybe a sleeping cat? Your support means the world, and keeps this little temple of sleepy history alive for others to find. Let's continue, shall we? The sun is rising again in part 10. So, traveler, we've wandered through tombs, whispered to gods, and traced the silent poetry of hieroglyphs. But let's return now to the dirt floors, the buzzing flies, and the blistering sun. Because tonight, I ask you the question most people don't dare to ask. Would you survive even a single day in ancient Egypt? Let's be honest. It's tempting to romanticize this world of pyramids, lotus flowers, and animal-headed gods. But beneath the gold and grandeur, life was hard, brutally hard. You'd wake up on a dirt floor, wrapped not in soft sheets, but in sweat and dust. Your breakfast? Gritty bread, if you're lucky. Your beverage? Thick, lukewarm beer that tastes more like porridge than celebration. You'd walk barefoot on scorching sand, your skin blistering under the merciless sun, your linen tunic no more protective than tissue in a sauna. And your day? A relentless cycle of hauling water, grinding grain, building monuments for rulers you'd never meet. No lunch breaks. No sick days. Just you, the heat, and the ever-watchful overseer. And if you dared to grumble? Careful. You weren't just disrespecting your boss. You were insulting a god. You worried not just about hunger or injury, but about divine punishment, curses, and the ever-present threat of diseases no healer could cure. Your dreams of a better life? Limited. If you were born a farmer, you died a farmer. There were no promotions, no reinventions, only survival. And yet, despite it all, the Egyptians weren't broken. They loved. They danced. They played music under starry skies. They told jokes and painted their walls with stories of hope, faith, and the eternal Nile. They built monuments that still stand today, whispering across the ages. We were here. We lived. We dreamed. And perhaps that's why. Even though, no, you probably wouldn't survive a day in their sandals. You can't help but admire them. Because for all their hardships, they endured. They believed. They found joy in the fleeting beauty of life. And planned carefully for the eternity that followed. So, as you lie comfortably in your modern bed tonight, spare a thought for those ancient souls. Their world may be long gone, but their stories? Still alive. And as we close this first chapter of our journey, know that the sands still hold more tales. In part 11, we'll voyage beyond Egypt, into new lands, new mysteries, and new questions. So stay cozy, traveler. And if you found comfort or curiosity in these sleepy historical wanderings, you know the ritual by now. Like, subscribe, and perhaps tell me in the comments, would you dare to face a single Egyptian morning? Or would you rather drift safely in dreams of pyramids and river gods? Your support keeps these ancient stories flowing, like the Nile itself. Until we meet again, in part 11, tonight, traveler, we set our gaze beyond the golden sands of Egypt, beyond the pyramids and the watchful eyes of Ori. Because our journey now takes us west, across oceans of time, to another ancient city. A place that whispers of gods, but shouts of fear. Teotihuacan. The place where gods were born. Before the mighty Aztec Empire. Before the Maya carved their cosmic calendars into stone. There stood a city unlike any other in the ancient Americas. At its height, around 100 to 250 C. Teotihuacan was a colossal metropolis. Over 100,000 people. Wide boulevards, stone apartments, pyramids that scraped the sky. But who built it? No one knows. There are no royal names carved into stone. No written records to tell us what they called themselves. Only the bones, the walls, and the haunting legacy of their most infamous monument, the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. Unlike the temples that reached for the sky in honor of gentle deities, this temple felt different, predatory, as if the serpents carved into its face were watching you even now. Fangs bared, eyes wide, frozen in mid-strike. This was not a temple built for comfort. It was built for fear. And beneath its base, archaeologists found a secret. Not just offerings of incense or pottery, but over 200 bodies. Young men, hands bound behind their backs. Decapitated, their remains arranged with eerie precision. This wasn't chaos. This was theater. A ritual. A transaction with the gods. Because in Teotihuacan, they believed the cosmos ran on blood. And the feathered serpent, though later remembered as a bringer of wisdom, had a darker hunger here. He demanded life. And so the rulers staged these sacrifices. Not in secret, but in front of thousands, turning violence into a public spectacle. A reminder that the gods were watching, and the rulers had the power to feed them. And perhaps, as you lie in your warm bed tonight, you feel the chill of that truth. That across oceans and deserts, humans have always sought to make sense of the universe, to keep the darkness at bay. With offerings, with faith, with fear. And next, in part 12, we will stand beneath those serpent heads and explore the cosmic logic that built this terrifying temple. A temple that wasn't just a house of worship, but a cosmic machine. So rest now, traveler. Let the distant drums fade into the night. And if these journeys into forgotten worlds are keeping you company, why not like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments? Would you have watched those rituals? Or closed your eyes and prayed the gods wouldn't see you? Either way, the feathered serpent awaits. We'll meet him in part 12. We return now, traveler, to the shadow of the temple of the feathered serpent. But tonight, we will look beyond the snarling stone faces, beyond the sacrificed bodies, to the reason behind it all. Because this temple, it wasn't just built to impress. It was designed to align the earth, the sky, and the underworld into one perfect, terrifying machine. You see, the people of Teotihuacan didn't see time as a straight line. They saw it as a cycle, a loop that demanded constant renewal. And what fueled this cosmic engine? Blood. The feathered serpent, part bird, part snake, was more than a god. He was a paradox, a being that slithered through the underworld and soared into the heavens. Life and death, chaos and order, bound in a single body. And the temple itself mirrored that logic. Every layer, every carving, every buried victim was arranged to reflect the cosmos. Quadrants, cardinal directions, symbolic numbers. Even the victims were placed with mathematical precision. Their deaths weren't accidents. They were necessary. To the people of Teotihuacan, building a temple wasn't just about stone and labor. It required sacrifice. It demanded offerings of life to ensure the universe kept spinning. And deep beneath the temple, archaeologists found tunnels filled with shimmering pyrite, pools of liquid mercury, and chambers that glowed like the night sky. A symbolic passage to the underworld, a cosmic mirror of the heavens above. To walk through it would be like walking through the Milky Way itself, a journey through creation, death, and rebirth. Because in their eyes, the gods had sacrificed themselves to create humanity. And now, it was humanity's turn to return the favor. And maybe, as you lie quietly tonight, listening to these ancient echoes, you feel a chill deeper than the desert winds. A realization that, across time and continents, humans have always sought to bargain with the unknown, to control chaos, even if it meant offering up the very thing they feared losing most: life. In part 13, we'll climb back to the surface and witness how the rulers of Teotihuacan turned this temple into more than a place of worship. They turned it into a theater of power, a stage where faith and fear danced hand in hand. So rest easy for now, traveler. Let the weight of the stars above you lull you to sleep. And if these stories have brought a touch of wonder to your night, feel free to like, subscribe, and perhaps tell me in the comments, would you have stood in awe at the temple of the feathered serpent? Or run from its shadow? We'll face those shadows together. In part 13. Tonight, traveler, we rise from the depths of the temple of the feathered serpent. But as we step into the plaza, blinking into the harsh daylight, we realize something even more unsettling. This temple wasn't built to comfort. It was built to intimidate. Imagine, you are a visitor from a small city-state. You arrive at the Avenue of the Dead, flanked by pyramids that stretch into the sky. But it is here, at the temple of the feathered serpent, that you stop and stare. Because this temple, it stares back. Dozens of serpent heads glare at you from the stone facade, their fangs frozen in a perpetual snarl. jaguar symbols prowl along the walls. And the plaza itself? A stage. This is no place for quiet worship. This is theater. And the rulers of Teotihuacan were its directors. They understood something crucial about power. Fear is a language, and nothing speaks louder than public sacrifice. In broad daylight, under the gaze of the serpent guards, priests in feathered headdresses and obsidian masks would chant, dance, and spill blood, turning cosmic myth into political performance, not just to please the gods, but to remind everyone watching that the city's rulers held the keys to the heavens and the power to unleash their wrath upon enemies or their own people. Even the architecture played its role. From the upper tiers of the temple, leaders would look down upon the gathered crowd. Every step, every chant, every drop of blood, carefully choreographed. And the message was clear. The gods were with them, and they were not afraid to feed them. For visitors, the message was even simpler. Teotihuacan didn't need to conquer you with swords. It conquered you with awe, with symbols, with the suffocating weight of belief. And perhaps, as you settle deeper under your blankets tonight, you realize the lesson still lingers in our world today. That symbols, rituals, and the careful crafting of fear have always been tools of power. In part 14, we'll follow the avenue of the dead further, to witness how Teotihuacan's rulers expanded their reach far beyond their city walls, without ever raising a single army. But for now, traveler, close your eyes. Let the echoes of drums and chants fade into the darkness. And if these ancient tales have stirred something in you tonight, why not like, subscribe, and perhaps share your thoughts in the comments? Would you have been awed or terrified standing in that plaza? Let's ponder that in part 14. Tonight, traveler, we leave behind the roaring plaza of the feathered serpent and walk the length of the avenue of the dead. But as we walk, we realize something odd about this city. Teotihuacan was vast, powerful, but curiously silent. No kings' names carved into stone, no royal tombs flaunting their treasures, no towering statues of mighty rulers glaring down from their thrones. This was a city without faces. And yet, its influence stretched far and wide, across hundreds of miles, from the distant Maya cities of Tikal and Copan to the Zapotec capital of Monte Alban. The fingerprints of Teotihuacan were everywhere. Obsidian blades, ceramic stiles, murals, architecture. They didn't send armies. They sent emissaries, merchants, priests, symbols. In some cases, they may have even orchestrated political coups, helping overthrow local rulers and installing allies more favorable to Teotihuacan's vision of order. But they didn't do it with swords. They did it with stories, with rituals, with the overwhelming presence of their temples, their trade goods, their cosmic ideologies. To the outside world, Teotihuacan wasn't just a city. It was the axis of the universe, a sacred engine that kept time, fate, and blood flowing in sync. And perhaps that's why they didn't need to shout their power. They whispered it. In stone, in obsidian, in the terrifying beauty of their monuments. Because when your city is designed to mirror the heavens, when your plazas are theaters of divine wrath, when your gods demand fear and devotion, you don't have to conquer. You simply exist. And the world comes to you. In part 15, we'll step inside the mystery of Teotihuacan's fall. Because even the most perfectly designed cosmic machine can break. But for now, traveler, let the quiet hum of Teotihuacan's forgotten avenues lull you to sleep. Let the feathered serpents guide your dreams. And if these soft echoes of ancient cities have helped you drift deeper into curiosity or rest, feel free to gently like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. Do you believe the greatest empire is ruled by sword? Or by belief? We'll explore that in part 15. Traveler, even the greatest cities crumble, and Teotihuacan was no exception. Its rise was swift, silent, and overwhelming. But it's full, slow, whispered, then sudden. By the year 550 C, the mighty city that once ruled the Valley of Mexico without kings or armies began to fracture. First, the signs were subtle. A long, merciless drought. Crops failed. The great trade routes grew quiet. And the rituals that once held the cosmos in balance began to feel hollow. The people grew restless. Whispers turned to grumbles. Grumbles into defiance. And then came the fire. Across the elite compounds, the administrative buildings, even the sacred temples themselves, signs of violent destruction appeared. The temple of the feathered serpent, once the height of fear and faith, was defaced, burned, desecrated. But this was no invasion from outside, no conquering army, no foreign king. This was an uprising from within. The very people who once gathered in awe beneath the serpent heads turned against their rulers, their priests, their gods. They burned the symbols of power. They shattered the icons. They tore down the system that had ruled them with blood and silence. And then, silence. Teotihuacan wasn't abandoned overnight, but it lost its soul. Trade collapsed. Artistic production ceased. The great rituals stopped. The rulers vanished. The city lingered as a shadow of its former self, a hollow monument to a lost order. And yet, the memory of Teotihuacan endured. Centuries later, the Aztecs stumbled upon its silent ruins, and they too stood in awe. They called it Teotihuacan, the place where gods were born, but they never knew the names of its builders. They only saw the bones of a civilization that had ruled through fear, faith, and cosmic design, and had vanished into the dust. In part 16, we will explore the lingering whispers of Teotihuacan, how even in ruin, it shaped the cultures that came after, and why its legacy still haunts us today. But for now, let the winds of the abandoned avenues sing you to sleep. Let the stone serpents close their eyes. And if these tales of vanished cities have brought you calm or wonder tonight, perhaps pause to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think it was the drought, or the weight of belief, that brought Teotihuacan to its knees? We'll reflect together. In part 16, even in ruin, traveler, Teotihuacan refused to be forgotten. The Aztecs, arriving centuries later, stood in awe of its empty temples, its silent avenues. They believed it was the work of gods, not men. They built their own myths around its pyramids. They revered the ruins as sacred ground, even as they had no idea who its original builders were. To them, the temple of the feathered serpent wasn't a ruin. It was a relic of divine truth, proof that the gods had once walked among mortals. But the irony remained. Teotihuacan, a city that ruled through fear, blood, and cosmic order, vanished without a written word, without a final decree. Only the stones remained, and questions. Yet, its legacy endured. Its obsidian blades were still prized, its architectural styles copied in distant lands, its cosmic rituals echoed in the blood-soaked ceremonies of the Aztecs. Even today, when tourists stroll through its plazas, children running past the snarling serpent heads, they walk upon ground soaked in stories, in secrets, in over 200 known human sacrifices, and countless unknown. Teotihuacan's true power wasn't its armies or its rulers. It was its myths, its architecture, its ability to merge beauty with terror. And maybe that's why we keep returning, not just to visit the ruins, but to understand the people who built them, and to confront the uncomfortable truth that the need to control, to sacrifice, to dominate, is as old as humanity itself. In part 17, we will sail forward in time, across the oceans, to meet another civilization where drums, gods, and fears shaped an empire. But for now, traveler, let the whispering stones of Teotihuacan fade into dreams. Let their lessons settle gently in your mind. And as we pause together on this quiet path, If these tales of forgotten cities have helped you unwind tonight, please feel free to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. Do you think cities remember us long after we've forgotten them? We'll explore that in part 17. And so, traveler, we leave the dry avenues of Teotihuacan behind and journey into the green shadows of the southern jungles. Here, beneath towering canopies and drapes of vines, lie the lost cities of the Maya, Tikal, Copan, Palenque, civilizations carved from limestone and jade, kingdoms of astronomers, priests, and warrior kings who built their cities not just for the living, but for the cosmos itself. Because to the Maya, time wasn't just a measure of days. It was the fabric of the universe, and they were its weavers. Their cities were cosmic maps. Every pyramid, every ball court, every stone stele, carefully aligned with the stars, the sun, and the movements of Venus, the planet of war, death, and rebirth. They built pyramids that rose like mountains above the jungle canopy, painted in vibrant reds, blues, and yellows, colors meant to mirror the heavens. But these cities weren't just places to live. They were stages for rituals, for sacrifices, for the eternal performance of keeping the universe in balance. The Maya believed the gods had created the world, but at a cost: their blood. And now, the dead had to be repaid. Kings offered their own blood in elaborate ceremonies, piercing their tongues, their ears, their skin, letting the sacred liquid fall onto burning bark, sending smoke and prayers skyward. But sometimes, it wasn't enough. Captives were taken from rival cities, from rebellious provinces, and they, too, became offerings. Their blood spilled upon temple steps, their hearts offered to the gods, to keep the cycles moving. But to the Maya, this wasn't cruelty. It was necessity. Sacrifice wasn't death. It was transformation. A journey into the underworld and back. And perhaps, as you lie under your soft blankets tonight, you feel the weight of their calendars ticking, their rituals humming like distant drums. A civilization that saw the universe as a wheel of life, death, and rebirth. In part 18, we'll walk through the silent plazas of these jungle cities and explore the mysterious collapse of the Maya world, a fall shrouded in shadows and unanswered questions. But for now, let the hum of the jungle cradle you to sleep. Let the stars guide your dreams. And if these ancient journeys are keeping you company tonight, why not like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, do you believe time is a straight line? Or a circle, like the Maya saw it? We'll ponder that in part 18. So, traveler, we now walk among the ruins of the Maya world. Empty plazas, collapsed temples, jungle routes curling through once glorious palaces. The question lingers like mist over the moss-covered stones. What happened here? Because by the year 900 CE, many of these vibrant cities fell silent. No more rituals echoing in the temples. No more scribes etching kings' victories into stone. No more bold games played beneath the watching gods. Just silence. Historians still debate the cause. Was it drought? Famine? War? Disease? A collapse of trade, of trust, of the belief systems that once held the cosmos together? Perhaps it was all of them. The Maya world wasn't one empire, but dozens of kingdoms. And as the rains failed, the crops withered, and the gods seemed distant, those kingdoms turned on each other. Monuments were defaced, temples abandoned, kings fled or fell to the blade. And the jungle, patient as always, crept back, swallowing the stones, erasing the stories. And yet, even in collapse, the Maya endured. The cities may have fallen, but the people remained. They retreated to the forests, the highlands. They kept their calendars, their language, their traditions, even as the outside world forgot them. And maybe that's the lesson hidden in the vines. That civilizations rise, they fall. But the heartbeat of a people, that's harder to silence. And perhaps, as you lie quietly tonight, you feel the hum of those forgotten cities. Not gone, just waiting, like seeds beneath the soil. In part 19, we will travel to yet another place where temples rose like mountains, and where the feathered serpent found a new face. In the heart of the Aztec Empire. But for now, traveler, let the gentle hush of the jungle soothe you to sleep. Let the stone steps fade into dreams. And as we approach the 90-minute mark of our journey together tonight, if these stories have brought you comfort, wonder, or simply a soft companion for the night, please feel free to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. Do you think civilizations truly die? Or do they simply change form? We'll continue pondering. In part 19, Traveler. Tonight, we follow the winding path of the feathered serpent as he slithers his way into a new empire, a new city, a new era. Tenochtitlan, the jewel of the Aztec Empire. Built upon a lake, its gleaming white temples and causeways shimmered like a vision. It was a city of canals, floating gardens, bustling markets, and towering pyramids. But beneath its beauty lurked a hunger for order, for sacrifice, for the blood that fed the sun itself. The Aztecs, like the Maya and Teotihuacan before them, believed the universe needed fuel. And that fuel was life. At the center of their empire stood the Templo Maya. And atop its steep stairs, rituals played out that made even seasoned warriors shudder. Hearts offered still beating to the gods. Blood spilled to keep the sun moving through the sky. And among these gods, the feathered serpent returned. Quetzalcoatl, feathered serpent, god of wind, knowledge, creation, and once, blood. But in the Aztec world, he wore many faces. To some, he was gentle, the civilizer, the bringer of wisdom and culture. To others, he was the shadow beneath the feathers, a reminder that life could only bloom from death. And the Aztec rulers knew this duality well. They turned their city into a stage of cosmic power. Their rituals, their ceremonies, their wars, all choreographed to maintain the balance of the universe. And like Teotihuacan before them, they understood that fear was power. But the Aztecs took it further. They perfected it. They turned sacrifice into spectacle, their festivals into theaters of awe and terror, their rulers towering not only in temples, but in legend. And yet, for all their might, for all their faith in the serpent gods, their empire would too crumble, like those before them. But that is a story for another night. In part 20, we'll witness the arrival of strangers from across the sea, and the fall of the last great Mesoamerican empire. But for now, let the silent canals of Tenochtitlan reflect the stars in your dreams. Let the feathered serpent watch over your sleep from the shadows. And if these echoes of lost empires have comforted you tonight, go ahead and like, subscribe, and perhaps share your thoughts in the comments. Do you see the feathered serpent as a bringer of wisdom, or a reminder of the price of order? We'll continue our journey in part 20. So, traveler, tonight we stand upon the causeways of Tenochtitlan. The city glows. Temples tower above the waters. Priests chant beneath the rising sun. But change is coming. From the east, strange sails appear upon the horizon. Strangers step onto the land of the feathered serpent. They carry steel, horses, and fire. And they speak of a god. And of gold. Hernán Cortés, the man who would bring the Aztec Empire to its knees. But when he arrived in 1519, the Aztecs didn't see a conqueror. They saw an omen, a prophecy fulfilled. Many whispered that Cortés was the feathered serpent himself, returned from exile to claim his throne. Others feared he was a harbinger of doom. And perhaps both were true. The Spanish, with their guns, their diseases, their unfamiliar tactics, shattered the balance of the Aztec world. They exploited divisions among the Aztecs' many enemies. Allies turned into betrayers. Plague swept through the city. and the rituals that once fed the sun could not stop the darkness. In 1521, after months of siege, starvation, and bloodshed, Tenochtitlan fell. The temples were torn down, the idols smashed, the canals clogged with bodies, the city drowned in silence. And yet, the feathered serpent endured. Not in temples, not in stone, but in stories, in myths that crossed oceans, in art, in culture, in memory. The Spanish tried to erase the Aztec world, but they could not erase the serpent. Even today, his feathers still flutter in the murals, the dances, the spirit of Mexico. Because, traveler, empires fall, but myths, they adapt, they evolve, they outlive stone. And as you lie beneath your own familiar sky tonight, perhaps you hear the echo of that truth, that no matter how much changes, the stories endure. In part 21, we will cross the seas and enter the world of ancient Europe, where kings ruled from crumbling castles, and belief clashed with reason. But for now, let the last embers of the Aztec world flicker into your dreams. Let the canals of Tenochtitlan shimmer beneath the moon. And if these tales have carried you gently into rest tonight, why not like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, do you think the Aztecs' greatest legacy was their city? Or their stories? We'll ponder that in part 21. And now, traveler, our path leads us across the vast grey oceans to the cold, crumbling kingdoms of medieval Europe. Gone are the golden temples, the feathered serpents, the jungles buzzing with life. Here, the world is harder, colder, ruled by kings whose power crumbles faster than the stones of their castles. The castles, they rise from misty hills and jagged cliffs like broken teeth. Symbols of power, yes, but also of fear, of paranoia, of men who rolled with iron and slept with one eye open. These fortresses weren't just homes. They were prisons, built to keep enemies out, and sometimes to keep people in. Life inside? Bleak, damp, dark. Stone walls dripped with cold. Fires barely kept the chambers warm. The air thick with smoke, rot, and whispers of betrayal. For the kings and lords of this world, power was fragile. Thrones bought with blood, held with treachery, lost with a dagger in the dark. And beyond the castle walls, the peasants labored, tilled frozen fields, endured famine, plague, and war, praying to saints and fearing devils. Their lives? Short, harsh, defined by the will of men who wore crowns, and rarely cared for the ones who bled for them. But the people, they endured. They found joy in small things, in festivals, songs, the flicker of a candle in the endless dark. They told stories of kings and knights, of dragons and maidens. Stories that made the hard days seem softer. Stories that made them feel, even for a moment, like the world beyond the walls was brighter. And perhaps, as you lie beneath your soft blankets tonight, you feel the chill of those forgotten castles, but also the warmth of those stories. Because while the kings are long gone, their castles crumbled. The tales linger. In part 22, we will step deeper into the heart of medieval Europe, where the clash between faith and fear shaped lives, and where belief itself became a battlefield. But for now, traveler, let the cold winds fade into dreams. Let the candles flicker gently in the night. And as we near the 2-hour mark of our quiet journey together tonight, if these ancient whispers have brought you comfort, calm, or curiosity, I invite you to like, subscribe, and perhaps share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think castles were symbols of strength or of fear? We'll reflect on that in part 22. And so, traveler, we wander deeper into the heart of medieval Europe, a world not just of stone walls, but of trembling faith. Here, belief wasn't gentle. It was fierce, raw, heavy like the winter fog that choked the narrow streets of forgotten towns. The church was everywhere, its spires piercing the sky, its bells marking the hours. and the prayers, and the punishments. For the peasants and nobles alike, the church was the center of life and death. It dictated what you could eat, when you could marry, where your soul would go when your body turned to dust. But alongside the sermons and the stained glass lurked shadows, superstitions, whispers of witches, demons, and curses. People feared the night. They feared the woods. They feared the things they could not name. Illness wasn't just sickness. It was punishment. A sign that the saints were displeased. Or worse, that the devil had found you. Strange births, failed crops, storms that flattened villages. All could be blamed on unseen forces. And the solutions? Prayers, pilgrimages, offerings, and sometimes executions. For in this world, faith wasn't a shield. It was a sword, and those who questioned, those who doubted, were labeled heretics, accused, judged, burned. But even in this world of harsh sermons and harsher punishments, people clung to small joys, to whispered prayers in the quiet of the night, to the comfort of a saint's statue, to the hope that, beyond the suffering, there was a better world waiting. And maybe, as you drift into sleep tonight, you feel the weight of that longing, that desire for something kinder beyond the shadows. In part 23, we'll wander into the forgotten corners of medieval towns, where plague doctors walked the streets, and the fear of death seeped into every stone. But for now, traveler, rest beneath the soft glow of imagined stained glass. Let the bells fade into the dark. And if these tales of forgotten faith and fear have helped you unwind tonight, feel free to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments. Do you think faith is more comforting? Or more terrifying? We'll explore that in part 23. And now, traveler, we step softly into the narrow alleys of medieval towns, cobblestones slick with rain, air thick with the scent of smoke, sweat, and something darker. Because tonight, the plague has arrived, the Black Death, a name whispered with trembling lips, a sickness that swept across Europe in the mid-1300s, leaving silence in its wake. It came from the east, carried by ships, rats, fleas. But to the people of these towns, it felt like punishment, a curse, a demon let loose upon the land. There was no understanding of germs, of infection, only the fear of the unknown. It began with fevers, coughs, dark swellings under the arms, in the groin, buboes they called them, painful, blackened, heralds of death. People died within days. Entire families vanished overnight. Villages emptied. Cities fell silent. The priests prayed. The doctors, dressed in their beat masks filled with herbs, walked the streets. But they could not stop it. Fear sped faster than the plague itself. Neighbors turned on each other. Blame was cast on the poor, the foreigners, the accused witches. Anyone, anything, to make sense of the terror. And yet, amid the horror, life clung on. The peasants tilled the fields. Mothers nursed their children. Lovers met in the dark, stealing what moments of joy they could from the shadow of death. And as the years passed, the plague faded. But the fear? It lingered. For generations, the skies remained. In the songs, the stories, the empty places once filled with laughter. And maybe, as you lie quietly tonight, you feel the soft ache of those lost voices, the memory of those who lived, and those who vanished into the mist. In part 24, we will wander into the strange, eerie world of plague art, and see how the people of Europe tried to make sense of their suffering, with brushing and macabre dances of death. But for now, traveler, let the echoes of silent streets cradle you to sleep. Let the candles flicker low. And as we near the 2-hour 30-minute mark of our journey tonight, if these tales of forgotten fears have brought you comfort or calm, you know the ritual. Like, subscribe, and perhaps share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think fear fades with time? Or do we simply learn to live beside it? We'll explore that in part 24. Tonight, traveler, we drift deeper into the aftermath of the plague. The streets are quieter now, but something lingers in the corners. Something haunting. You see, the people of Europe didn't just bury their dead. They painted them. They wrote them into songs. They etched them into the walls of churches and chapels. Because when death walks beside you every day, you find ways to stare back. And thus was born the art of the macabre, the dance of death. In frescoes, carvings, and manuscripts, artists painted skeletons hand in hand with kings, with queens, with peasants, with children. The message was clear. Death came for all. It spared no crown, no coin, no crown of gold. It danced to palaces and hovels alike. These weren't just warnings. They were mirrors, reminders of the fragile balance between life and the void. Churches became theaters of fear and reflection. Walls painted with rotting corpses, graveyard processions, and angels turning their faces away from suffering. And yet, in these grim images, there was a strange comfort, a reminder that even in darkness, art endures, stories endure, human creativity endures. Even as the Black Death emptied the streets, it filled the pages with images that still speak to us today. Images that tell us the people of that time didn't just fear death. They danced with it, mocked it, held its hand in the moonlight. And perhaps, as you lie safe tonight in your own familiar world, you understand that impulse, that desire to turn fear into beauty, pain into poetry, darkness into song. In part 25, we'll journey into the world of medieval medicine and see how doctors, healers, and hopeful quacks tried to fight the unseen killer. But for now, traveler, let the painted skeletons drift into your dreams. Let their dances remind you that even the darkest times can give birth to art. And if these stories have kept you company tonight, softly like, subscribe, and share your reflections in the comments. Do you think art is a shield against fear, or a companion to it? We'll ponder that in part 25. Tonight, traveler, we wander into the dim, smoky rooms of medieval healers, the air thick with incense, and something sour, the scent of desperation. Because when the Black Death swept through Europe, doctors found themselves facing an invisible enemy they couldn't name, couldn't see, couldn't fight. And so, they tried everything. Herbs were burned in the streets, scented oils dabbed upon temples. People clutched posies, believing sweet smells would ward off the poisoned air. And the doctors? They dressed for battle. They wore long, dark robes, wide-brimmed hats, and most famously, those beaked masks, filled with cloves, lavender, and myrrh. They believed the plague floated in the air, carried by foul odors. The beaks were their armor, but they didn't know. The real killers were the fleas, hiding in the fur of rats. Unseen, unstoppable. Treatments ranged from the hopeful to the horrific. Patients were bled, lanced, their buboes sliced open and drained, sometimes smeared with strange concoctions of vinegar, onions, and herbs. Others wore charms, recited prayers, clutched relics, hoping faith would shield them. And yet, in all their rituals and remedies, nothing worked. But still, they tried, because to do nothing was to surrender. And humans, even in their darkest moments, cling to hope. Perhaps that's the lesson the plague left us, that even in a world choking on death, the apothecaries still ground their herbs, the healers still whispered prayers, the mothers still soothed their children with stories of angels and saints. And maybe, as you lie quietly tonight, you understand that fragile thread of hope, that need to believe in something, even when everything feels lost. In part 26, we'll step out of the sick rooms and into the streets, where the plague changed not just bodies, but cities, cultures, and the course of history itself. But for now, traveler, let the soft clink of glass bottles and the scent of lavender drift into your dreams. Let the healers rest. And if these gentle tales have been a quiet companion to you tonight, feel free to like, subscribe, and perhaps tell me in the comments, do you think medieval medicine was a sign of ignorance or of hope? We'll reflect together in part 26. And now, traveler, we step out of the sick rooms, out of the darkened homes where candles flickered over the dying, into the streets, where the world itself had changed. The Black Death didn't just claim lives. It hollowed out entire villages. Fields lay empty, markets silent, the bells of the churches tolled. But fewer souls gathered to listen. And yet, in that terrible emptiness, something unexpected stirred. Labor became precious. Peasants, once bound to the land, found new power. They demanded wages, rights, freedom, and many received it. For the first time in centuries, the rigid chains of feudalism cracked. Art too transformed. Where once paintings celebrated saints and kings, now they depicted skulls, skeletons, and the fragile beauty of life. A single candle, a wilting flower, a reminder that all things pass. Even the church, once untouchable, found its grips slipping. People questioned, wondered why their prayers went unanswered, why the saints did not save them. And slowly, a new age of inquiry began to bloom in the cracks. It was not a revolution born of battles, but of empty spaces, of silence, of grief. The plague, a killer unseen, left behind not just death, but change. A world forever altered, more fragile, but perhaps more aware of its own impermanence. And perhaps, as you lie quietly tonight, you feel the gentle ache of those changes still echoing in your own world, reminding you that even after the darkest nights, new dawns still come. In part 27, we'll sail forward into the Renaissance, where art, science, and wonder tried to fill the void the plague left behind. But for now, traveler, let the quiet hum of the reborn world lull you to sleep. Let the stars above remind you of all that endures. And as we near the 3-hour mark of our journey together tonight, if these stories have kept you company, if they brought you comfort, curiosity, or simply a gentle hand to hold in the dark, please feel free to like, subscribe, and perhaps tell me in the comments, do you think the plague ended the Middle Ages, or gave birth to the modern world? We'll explore that. In part 27, traveler, the plague faded, the ashes settled, and in the quiet that followed, something beautiful stirred. The Renaissance, the rebirth. In the streets of Florence, Venice, and Rome, brushes danced across canvases once again. Marble was carved into forms of gods, men, and dreamers. Ink flowed into books. Ideas blossomed where fear had once ruled. It was as if, after staring into the darkness for so long, humanity turned its gaze upward, to the stars, to the heavens, and most daring of all, to itself. Artists painted not just saints, but everyday people. Smiles, flaws, tenderness. They celebrated the human form, the curve of a hand, the gleam of light on skin. Scientists questioned the old ways. They studied the stars, the body, the natural world, peeling back the layers of superstition that had clouded them for centuries. Gutenberg's press rolled out words that once belonged only to monks and kings, and spread them to merchants, sailors, peasants. Knowledge spilled into the streets. The Renaissance wasn't a rejection of the past. It was an embrace of the possible. And yet, the shadows lingered. Paintings still showed skulls hidden among the fruit bowls. Philosophers still wrote of the thin line between genius and madness. Because they knew, they remembered, that life is fragile, precious, brief. And that's why they filled it with beauty, with music, with laughter, with wonder. Perhaps, as you lie quietly tonight, You feel that same longing stir in you. That desire to create, to question, to gaze at the stars and ask, what if? In part 28, we'll wander into the workshops of the great masters, Da Vinci, Michelangelo, Titian, and see how they reshaped not just art, but the way we see ourselves. But for now, traveler, let the gentle colors of the Renaissance paint your dreams. Let the soft glow of oil lamps and frescoes lull you to sleep. And if these stories have been your quiet companions tonight, please like, subscribe, and perhaps share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think the Renaissance was a rebirth? Or a memory of what was lost? We'll explore that in part 28. Tonight, traveler, we wander into the studios of the Renaissance, places of light and shadow, of marble dust and wet paint, of whispered genius and silent obsessions. In Florence, a young artist bends over his sketches. His name? Leonardo da Vinci. But he is more than an artist. He is a questioner, an observer of nature's smallest details. The curve of a bird's wing, the mechanics of a human heart, the geometry of water in motion. To him, art and science were not enemies. They were partners. Two ways of seeing the same beautiful, mysterious world. His notebooks, filled with backward script and swirling inventions, are not just designs. They are dreams. Flying machines, bridges, mechanical knights. And his paintings? They whisper secrets. The Mona Lisa, her smile soft and unknowable, a reflection of the mysteries he saw everywhere. Not far away, in Rome, another master bends over a slab of marble. Michelangelo, where Da Vinci saw the world in quiet curiosity. Michelangelo saw it in struggle, in raw, divine power. To him, the human body was not just flesh. It was spirit trapped in stone, waiting to be freed by his hammer. The ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, a masterpiece born from pain, exhaustion, and furious devotion. Each figure alive with movement, longing, rebellion. And though he battled with popes and wrestled with his own demons, Michelangelo left the world more beautiful than he found it. And there were others. Titian, painting in lush reds and golds. Caravaggio, filling his canvases with shadows and sinners. Raphael, sketching serenity into the faces of Madonnas. They painted not to please kings, but to capture something eternal. The human spirit. The divine spark. The ache of being alive. And maybe, as you lie quietly tonight, you feel that same ache. That same longing. To create. To be seen. To be remembered. In part 29, we'll drift into the streets of Renaissance cities, where merchants, philosophers, and rebels carried these ideas beyond the canvas, into the noisy, messy, wonderful world of everyday life. But for now, traveler, let the scent of oil paint and the soft hush of frescoes lull you to sleep. Let the masters paint you dreams. And if these stories of art and wonder have kept you company tonight, you know the ritual. Like, subscribe, and share your reflections in the comments. Do you think these artists saw the world as it was, or as it could be? We'll wander further. In part 29, traveler, let us leave the studios now and step into the streets. Because the Renaissance wasn't only in the palaces. It wasn't only in the chapels, or the masterpieces hung upon marble walls. It was in the markets, the taverns, the bustling ports and narrow alleys, where merchants haggled over silk and spices, where booksellers laid out printed pages still wet with ink, where poets debated with sailors beneath the glow of lanterns. The Renaissance was not just a movement of art. It was a movement of people. The printing press, that quiet revolution of ink and paper, took the ideas of the scholars and placed them in the hands of bakers, weavers, blacksmiths. Suddenly, a farmer could read a poem. A tailor could debate philosophy. A maid could hear the stories of Rome, of Greece, of distant lands she would never see. Knowledge spilled beyond the walls of the universities, into the squares, into the homes. Even fashion changed. Clothes grew more elaborate, more colorful. People wore their status in their fabrics, their jewelry, their gestures. Music filled the plazas. Dances borrowed from distant lands brought strangers together beneath the same stars. The Renaissance wasn't just a rebirth of art. It was a rebirth of curiosity, of self-expression, of daring to imagine life not as it was, but as it could be. And perhaps, as you lie quietly tonight, you hear the soft hum of those streets. You see the glow of candles and windows, the laughter of lovers sneaking through garden gates, the scribble of ink upon fresh paper. You feel the heartbeat of a world waking up and daring to dream bigger. In Part 30, we will wander toward the edges of the Renaissance, where explorers set sail into the unknown, chasing new worlds, new riches, and new myths. But for now, traveler, let the soft music of the Renaissance streets lull you to rest. Let the dreams of poets and painters drift into your own. And as we near the 4-hour mark of our journey tonight, if these stories of wonder and awakening have comforted you, please feel free to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think the Renaissance changed the world, or simply reminded us of who we always were? We'll explore that in Part 30. And now, traveler, our journey carries us beyond the streets of Florence, Venice, and Lisbon, out across the restless sea. Because the Renaissance spirit wasn't content to stay upon the land. It gazed beyond the horizon and dared to chase what lay there. This was the age of exploration, an age of sails, of star charts, of whispered legends. Explorers like Columbus, da Gama, and Magellan set forth from familiar shores, guided by the winds and by myths as old as time. They sought riches, spices, silks, new lands, but they also sought something deeper, to find the edges of their maps, to see if the world truly ended in dragons and sea monsters, or if there was something more. Their ships were small, fragile things upon the vast ocean, wooden vessels creaking in the salt air, relying on the stars above, and the courage of those aboard. They faced storms, starvation, mutiny, unknown diseases that claimed them before they ever reached land. And when they did, they found new peoples, new worlds, new questions. But the age of exploration wasn't only a story of adventure. It was also a story of conquest, of greed, of suffering. For while the explorers brought maps and ideas, they also brought swords and plagues. They reshaped the world, connected continents, bridged oceans, but they also unleashed tragedies that still echo today. And yet, amid the darkness, there was wonder, the human longing to see what lay beyond the known, to find new stars, new songs, new stories. Perhaps, as you lie quietly tonight, you hear the soft creak of those old ships, the flap of sails, the hush of sailors singing to the moon. You feel the ache of those who left everything behind, in search of something they couldn't yet name. In Part 31, we will step ashore in the New World and explore how myths of gold, gods, and monsters shaped the first encounters between worlds. But for now, traveler, let the gentle rocking of imagined waves carry you into dreams. Let the stars above be your guide. And as we near the 4-hour 30-minute mark of our long voyage together tonight, if these tales of wanderers and dreamers have been your quiet companion, please like, subscribe, and perhaps share your reflections in the comments. Do you think exploration is about discovery, or about understanding ourselves? We'll drift further in Part 31. Tonight, traveler, we step ashore. The explorers have crossed the oceans, and now, upon unfamiliar sands, they meet eyes with strangers. The New World. To the Europeans, it was a place of myths, of golden cities, of gods in human form, of monstrous beasts and treasures beyond imagination. But to the peoples of these lands, it was home, sacred ground, rich with stories, spirits, ancestors, And when these two worlds touched, the air itself seemed to crackle with tension, with wonder, with dread. The Europeans brought steel, horses, cannons, but also stories of empires across the sea, of gods who demanded obedience, of maps where their own lands stood proudly at the center. The indigenous peoples saw strangers dressed in metal, pale as ghosts, speaking strange tongues, carrying weapons that spat fire. Some believed they were gods, others saw them as omens. Many welcomed them, hoping to forge alliances or appease forces they could not yet understand. But misunderstandings grew. Gifts were misread as tributes, rituals mistaken for submission. The explorers saw what they wanted to see. Myths of gold clouded their eyes. And soon, fear turned to greed, curiosity to conquest. These first encounters were not wars at first. They were dances, of gestures, of gifts, of quiet observations. But beneath it all, a storm brewed. And the stories these explorers carried with them, stories of divine right, of untamed lands needing to be claimed, would soon unleash devastation. And yet, for a moment, there was still wonder. Two worlds staring at each other across a fragile line, both wondering, who are you? Where did you come from? Are you what we've been waiting for? Or what we've been warned about? Perhaps, as you lie quietly tonight, you feel the ache of those moments, those fragile hours where everything could have unfolded differently, but didn't. In part 32, we will drift into the myths of lost cities, of El Dorado, the city of gold, and see how these tales fueled the fires of conquest. But for now, traveler, let the soft hush of unfamiliar shores lull you to sleep. Let the distant stars shimmer over two worlds, not yet colliding, but waiting. And as we approach the 5-hour mark of our shared journey tonight, if these stories of first meetings have given you a quiet companion for the night, please gently like, subscribe, and perhaps share your reflections in the comments. Do you think these first encounters were fated, or shaped by the stories we tell ourselves? We'll wander deeper in part 32. Tonight, traveler, we drift deeper into the jungles of the New World, through vines, mist, and whispered stories. Because here, among rivers that shimmer like molten silver, lies a legend, El Dorado, the Golden One. To the Europeans, it was more than a place. It was an obsession, a city made of gold, a kingdom where kings dusted themselves in shimmering powders, and rivers ran rich with treasure. But El Dorado was never truly a city. It began as a story, a ceremony told among the Muisca people of South America. A new chief would coat himself in gold dust, sail to the middle of a sacred lake, and offer treasures to the gods below. But the Spanish, they heard what they wanted to hear. They saw not a ceremony, but a city. And so, they searched, and searched. For years, expeditions vanished into jungles, into swamps, into rivers that swallowed men whole. They chased rumors, maps drawn by trembling hands, tales told by frightened captives. They believed El Dorado must be out there, just over the next mountain, the next river, the next death. And in their quest, they left behind ruin, villages burned, peoples enslaved, landscapes scarred by the insatiable hunger for a city that never existed. But still, they searched, because El Dorado wasn't just a place. It was a mirror, a reflection of the greed, the dreams, the fears of those who chased it. And perhaps, as you lie quietly tonight, you understand that hunger, that ache to find something glittering beyond the known, to believe there is a land where all your wishes come true, even if it's only a dream. In part 33, we will follow the forgotten footsteps of these explorers into the heart of lost expeditions, of men swallowed by the jungles they tried to tame. But for now, traveler, let the soft rustle of the jungle leaves lull you into dreams of golden cities, Let the river of myths carry you gently into sleep. And as we near the 5-hour 30-minute mark of our long journey tonight, if these stories have been a gentle companion to you, please feel free to like, subscribe, and perhaps tell me in the comments, do you think El Dorado was ever real? Or was it always a reflection of the gold we seek inside ourselves? We'll wander deeper. In part 33. Tonight, traveler, we follow the fading footprints of those who chased El Dorado and never returned. Because the jungles of the New World did not welcome them. They devoured them. Men like Francisco de Orellana, like Sir Walter Raleigh. Men who set forth into rivers that never ended. Forests that whispered threats in languages they could not understand. They brought with them dreams and swords, and the arrogance that the world could be conquered, tamed, mapped. But the jungle had no patience for maps. It swallowed their camps, turned their armor to rust, their ships to skeletons of wood tangled in vines, their stories into whispers beneath the canopy. They starved, they quarreled, they betrayed each other. They were consumed by fever, insects, hunger, and the weight of their own legends. Some of them went mad. Some disappeared entirely, their bones hidden beneath roots, their names fading into the leaves. And yet, still they came, because the myth of El Dorado was more powerful than truth, more powerful than reason. It wasn't the gold they chased anymore. It was the promise that beyond the next river bend, beyond the next emerald mountain, they might find not just wealth, but meaning, immortality. And perhaps, as you lie safely tonight, you feel the pull of that same human ache, that hunger to chase something just out of reach, even if it costs you everything. In part 34, we will step back and reflect on the legacy of these lost expeditions, how they reshaped the world map, and left behind scars that still linger today. But for now, traveler, let the green hush of the jungle cradle you into sleep. Let the ghosts of the lost explorers rest beneath the stars they never found. And as we near the 6-hour mark of our long, shared journey tonight, if these stories of lost dreams have given you comfort, calm, or wonder, please softly like, subscribe, and share your reflections in the comments. Do you think these men were fools? Or simply human? We'll ponder that in part 34. Traveler, tonight, we step back from the tangled jungles. We look at the maps left behind. Maps filled with mistakes, with phantom rivers, with mountains that never existed, with warnings of monsters, and promises of gold. Because those explorers who vanished left more than bones behind. They left stories, maps drawn from fevered memories, legends told by survivors with trembling voices, tales that would ripple through the world for centuries. El Dorado was never found, but it lived on, in stories whispered by sailors around fires, in books written by men who never set foot in the New World, in the names etched upon maps by kings who believed the land could be divided by ink. These explorers, some brave, some brutal, some blinded by greed, changed the way the world saw itself. They opened new trade routes. They connected continents. But they also unleashed sorrow, colonization, exploitation, a reshaping of the world that brought both marvels and misery. Yet even now, the myth of El Dorado lingers, in stories, in films, in that human longing to believe that somewhere, beyond the edges of the known, there is still a city of gold. But perhaps, El Dorado was never a place. It was always inside us, the glittering hunger for more, for wonder, for something just out of reach. And maybe, as you lie quietly tonight, you feel the softness of that truth, that sometimes the greatest journeys are not those that find gold, but those that find ourselves. In part 35, we will drift away from the New World and return to the old, where revolution stirred, empires teetered, and new dreams began to rise. from the ashes of old ones. But for now, traveler, let the old maps fade into your dreams. Let the rivers and mountains of the heart guide you safely into sleep. And as we near the 6-hour 30-minute mark of our journey tonight, if these stories of lost explorers have offered you comfort, reflection, or calm, please feel free to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. Do you think the real treasure was the journey itself? We'll sail onward. In part 35. Tonight, traveler, we drift back across the oceans to the old world. But it is no longer the world we left. The age of exploration had read on the maps. Empires swelled with wealth. But beneath the gold and grandeur, cracks appeared. The age of revolutions had begun. It started quietly. In coffee houses, in pamphlets passed hand to hand, in whispered conversations among merchants, philosophers, and dreamers. They asked questions once forbidden. What is freedom? Who should rule? Why do some have everything, while others starve? These questions became sparks, and those sparks became fires. In America, colonists rose against the distant rule of a king. They declared independence, fought a war, and carved a new nation upon land already scarred by the stories of those who lived there before them. In France, the people stormed the Bastille. They toppled a monarchy that had ruled by divine right. They dreamed of liberty, equality, fraternity. And for a time, they bathed their streets in both hope and blood. Elsewhere, the winds of change blew. In Haiti, enslaved people rose up, defeating empires, declaring themselves free. In South America, revolutionaries like Simón Bolívar led armies across mountains and jungles, chasing dreams of nations unshackled from colonial chains. But these revolutions, they were messy, contradictory. They toppled kings, only to crown new rulers. They promised freedom, but sometimes replaced it with fear. And yet, something had shifted. The world would never be the same. The old ways, the old empires, the old certainties could no longer hold. And perhaps, as you lie quietly tonight, you feel the tremor of those changes still beneath your own world. The questions they asked still echo today. In part 36, we will drift into the fires of the Industrial Revolution, where machines, factories, and smoke reshaped not just the land, but the very rhythm of human life. But for now, traveler, let the soft hum of forgotten revolutions lull you into sleep. Let the dreams of freedom, imperfect though they were, whisper through your rest. And as we approach the 7-hour mark of our long journey tonight, if these stories of change and courage have given you a quiet companion, please gently like, subscribe, and perhaps share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think revolutions free us, or simply remind us that freedom is always a fragile thing? We'll wander deeper. In part 36. Traveler, tonight we walk into a world transformed not by swords, but by steam. The Industrial Revolution, an era of machines, factories, and endless smokestacks, reaching towards skies once ruled by cathedrals. It began in the workshops of Britain, in towns where rivers once turned mills. Now engines roared, coal fed the fires. Iron and steel built new empires of gears and pistons. The world grew louder, faster, hungrier. Factories rose where fields once stretched. Workers streamed into cities, leaving behind the rhythms of the land for the grinding pace of the clock. Children labored in mines. Women worked spinning frames for hours under flickering gaslight. Men toiled in foundries, shaping steel into rails, ships, and machines that would drive the world forward. And yet, there was wonder. Trains cut across continents. Steamships crossed oceans. Telegraphs whispered across wires stretched between cities, shrinking the world with every dot and dash. The Industrial Revolution changed everything. Work, time, even dreams. No longer tied to the cycles of sun and seasons. People lived by factory bells, by shifts, by wages. For some, it brought progress, comfort, new inventions that filled homes with light, warmth, and music. But for many, it brought hardship, crowded slums, polluted air, exhaustion that never ended. And yet, even in the smoke, the soot, the relentless clang of metal, humans found ways to dream. Poets wrote of the beauty and terror of the new world. Artists painted the clash of man and machine. Workers raised their voices, demanding rights, better lives, a world where progress served people, not the other way around. And perhaps, as you lie quietly tonight, you feel the ache of that age still humming beneath your own world. The rhythm of machines, of progress, of questions still unanswered. In part 37, we will wander into the age of empires reborn, when the world, connected by steam and steel, became a chessboard of colonies, conquests, and uneasy dreams. But for now, traveler, let the soft, distant whistle of trains lull you into sleep. Let the fires of the foundries fade to a gentle glow. And as we near the 7-hour, 30-minute mark of our long, shared journey tonight, if these tales of steel and smoke have been your quiet companion, please softly like, subscribe, and perhaps share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think progress is a gift, or a burden we have yet to fully understand? We'll wander further. In part 37, Traveler, tonight, we sail into the twilight of the 19th century, a time when the world was stitched together by steam and by empire. This was the age when distant lands, once shrouded in mystery, were drawn onto European maps in bold, confident lines. Africa, Asia, the Pacific, carved into colonies, divided by rulers who believed the world was theirs to measure, to own, to civilize. They built railways through deserts, laid telegraph lines across oceans, erected grand buildings in cities far from home, planting their flags like signatures upon the earth. But beneath the speeches of progress lurked greed, exploitation, violence. Entire peoples were displaced, cultures silenced, languages erased. In India, the British ruled from glittering palaces, while famine claimed millions in the countryside. In Africa, the scramble for colonies turned kingdoms into chess pieces, lines drawn in London and Paris. Ignoring the rivers, the people, the histories they sliced apart. But amid the oppression, there was also resistance, rebellions, whispers of freedom, of independence. And yet, even those fighting the empires found themselves bound by the New World Order. Trade, industry, technology, they connected the world in ways no sword ever could. Silks from China dressed ladies in Paris. Rubber from the Congo drove factories in Manchester. Sugar from the Caribbean sweetened tea in London. The world had become small, and yet, more divided than ever. And perhaps, as you lie quietly tonight, you feel the weight of those forgotten naps. The borders still drawn by old empires. The echoes of voices still longing to be heard. In part 38, we will drift toward the dawn of the 20th century, where these fragile empires would face storms they could not withstand, and the world would break into war. But for now, traveler, let the soft hush of old steamships and forgotten railways lull you to sleep. Let the dreams of distant lands fill your rest with wonder and caution. And as we approach the 8-hour mark of our quiet journey tonight, if these stories of empires and echoes have been your gentle companion, please softly like, subscribe, and perhaps share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think the world is more connected today, or more divided than ever? We'll reflect further. In part 38, Traveler, tonight, we cross into the 20th century, a new era, a modern world of cities, factories, telegraphs, and electric lights. But beneath the glitter of progress, old wounds festered, old rivalries simmered. The great empires, Britain, France, Germany, Russia, Austria-Hungary, the Ottomans, they stood tall, but their roots were fragile, and when the spark came, it was small. A shot in Sarajevo. A single death. But it lit a fire the world had never seen before. The First World War. The Great War. Nations marched to battle believing it would be over by Christmas. It lasted 4 years. And in those years, the world learned new ways to suffer. Trenches stretched like scars across Europe. Men lived, fought, and died in the mud. Poison gas crept across fields once green with wheat. Tanks rumbled. Airplanes dropped bombs. The old ways of war, of honor, of chivalry, were buried beneath barbed wire and industrial death. By the end, empires collapsed. The Austro-Hungarian Empire dissolved. The Ottomans crumbled. The Russian Tsar fell to revolution. And yet, the peace that followed was uneasy. The wounds ran deep. And into that broken world, more shadows crept. Economic collapse. Fascism. Extremes that promised to make nations strong again. And when the next war came, it was bigger, crueler, more devastating. World War II. A war of cities turned to ash. Of genocides. Of bombs that split the atom itself. By 1945, the world lay shattered. The old empires were gone. A new world had begun. One divided by iron curtains. By nuclear fears. By uneasy peace. And perhaps, as you lie quietly tonight, you feel the weight of those years still pressing upon our present. The scars left not just on lands, but on hearts. In part 39, we will drift into the cold, uncertain decades that followed, where the world balanced on the edge of annihilation, and dreamed still of peace. But for now, traveler, let the ghosts of forgotten wars drift softly into the night. Let the old battlefields fade into fields of sleep. And as we near the 8-hour 30-minute mark of our journey tonight, if these stories of a world broken and rebuilt have been your gentle companion, please softly like, subscribe, and perhaps share your reflections in the comments. Do you think peace is something we inherit, or something we must remake? Again and again? We'll ponder that in part 39. Traveler, tonight we drift into the shadows of the Cold War. A war without battlefields, without armies clashing face to face, but a war nonetheless. One fought in whispers, in threats, in the spaces between. After World War II, the world split into two great camps, the United States and the Soviet Union. Two superpowers, two visions of the future, two ideologies staring at each other across iron curtains and nuclear silos. It was a war of spies, of codes, of satellites drifting silently above the earth, of submarines lurking beneath the waves, carrying enough firepower to erase cities in moments. Children practiced hiding beneath desks. Signs pointed to bomb shelters. Families lived with the quiet dread that any moment a button might be pressed, and the sky would turn to fire. But the Cold War wasn't fought only with missiles. It was fought with music, with art, with propaganda, with Olympic Games. Each side trying to prove its way of life was stronger, better, more human. It was fought in faraway lands, in Korea, in Vietnam, in proxy wars where the Cold War turned hot, and the innocent suffered most. And yet, in this long, frozen standoff, there were moments of hope, when men from both sides shook hands in space, when voices called for peace, for disarmament, when walls came down. In 1989, the Berlin Wall, that cold, grey scar dividing East and West Germany, fell. People danced atop it, chipped pieces from it, let the weight of fear slip from their shoulders. By the early 1990s, the Soviet Union itself dissolved. The Cold War ended. At least, on paper. But the shadows lingered. The lessons of that war, of fear, of suspicion, of fragile peace, remain. And perhaps, as you lie quietly tonight, you feel the hush of that age still humming beneath our world. The delicate balance between hope and history. In part 40, We will sail into the world we know today. A world of global networks, new fears, and old ghosts wearing new faces. But for now, traveler, let the distant echoes of Cold War sirens fade into sleep. Let the dreams of peace drift quietly into your heart. And as we near the 9-hour mark of our long journey together tonight, if these stories of silent wars and fragile hopes have been your gentle companion, please softly like, subscribe, and perhaps share your reflections in the comments. Do you think the Cold War ever truly ended? Or does it still echo? In new forms? We'll wander into those reflections. In part 40, Traveler, we have reached the present. A world lit not by oil lamps, but by glowing screens. By satellites orbiting silently above us. By connections that span continents in the blink of an eye. The old empires are gone, but their ghosts still linger in borders, in languages, in memories. The world is smaller now. A tangled web of networks, economies, and stories. We can speak to someone across the world in moments. We can see the stars to robotic eyes. We can wander the streets of ancient cities with a swipe of our fingers. But we also face new shadows. Climate change, pandemics, wars fought with code instead of cannons, new empires rising, old divisions wearing new masks. The myths have changed, but the human heart still aches for meaning, still longs for connection, still wonders, where do we go from here? Perhaps the lesson, traveler, from all these stories is that history never truly ends. It flows. It folds upon itself, each age dreaming of the next, while haunted by the past. And maybe that is not a reason for despair, but for humility, for hope. Because if history teaches us anything, it is that even after the darkest nights, people sing, people rebuild, people find ways to dream. And perhaps, as you lie quietly tonight, listening to these soft echoes of time, you feel that same gentle hope stir inside you. That same spark that built pyramids, that sailed oceans, that painted ceilings, that dared to imagine a better world. And so, as our long journey together comes to a close, let the hum of the modern world soften into silence. Let the lights of cities fade into stars. Let the stories settle into your dreams. And as we near the 9-hour 30-minute mark of our shared voyage tonight, if this journey through time has comforted you, if it has given you rest, wonder, or simply kept you company in the quiet hours, please softly like, subscribe, and perhaps share your reflections in the comments. Do you think history is something we remember? Or something we live every day? Thank you, traveler, for walking with me through shadows, through golden cities, through forgotten wars, through dreams, and into the soft hush of now. May your night be gentle, and your dreams endless. And so, our long, winding journey draws to a close. We have walked together through forgotten streets, whispered among lost cities, sailed upon rivers of myth and memory, and wandered across the pages of history. From the banks of the Nile to the neon-lit towers of today, we have seen empires rise in golden splendor and crumble into dust. We have heard the echoes of wars that shook the earth, and the soft songs of those who dreamed of peace. We have watched as the drumbeat of humanity shifted, from stone to steel, from parchment to pixel, from whispered prayer to silent code. And yet, beneath it all, one truth remained: that we, as humans, have always been wanderers of time, carriers of stories, seekers of meaning, builders of fragile dreams upon shifting sands. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all, that history is not something behind us. It walks beside us. It breathes within us. And so, as you lie quietly now, let these stories settle softly into your heart. Let them remind you that even in moments of darkness, we have always found a way to write, to build, to hope, to love. Thank you, traveler, for walking this long road with me tonight, for listening, for wondering, for remembering. If this journey has brought you comfort, if it has kept you company in the hush of night, I invite you, softly, to like this video, subscribe for more stories to sleep by, and share your reflections in the comments. Because while the past may sleep, our stories never do. They wait for listeners like you to give them life again. Until our next journey together, may your dreams be gentle and your nights endless.